The woman singing at night. I posted my story as a response to an Ask Reddit thread and was told I should post it here, so here it is. Growing up, I always wanted to go on a bike ride at night. Something about it seemed really cool to me. It wasn't until I was 13 years old that my mom finally let me. She told me to wear my helmet, have my phone, take a flashlight, and she set the parameters for where I was allowed to go. She gave me about 4 miles, which was a lot to me, so right after the sun set, I was off. I loved it. There were no people out walking their dogs, no kids running around, and the temperature was perfect, etc. It was really fun, so fun, that I ignored my limits my mom set. You see, where I was biking was all walking paths. It was one of those grassy areas between 2 neighborhoods. There was this long path that went at least 600 feet at a 25-degree angle. I was flying down this hill having an absolute blast and darted right through the parameters. My mom set these limits for a reason. Everything on the inside was close to houses and people. The outside, more specifically, the place where the path I was on led to, was barren. I rode along this path for 10 minutes before I could only see some of the lights of the houses on the inside of the limits. After 15 minutes of riding along this dirt path, I hear singing. It sounded about 30 to 40 feet in front of me. I stopped riding to hear it better. It was a woman's voice. She was singing Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles, but she wasn't singing the words, just the melody of the vocals. Her voice was strange. You know when you have phlegm in your throat? Your voice gets scratchy? That's what her voice sounded like. I inch forward and try to see her. I get close enough to see the silhouette of hair bouncing up and down like she was headbanging. I decide to get my flashlight out. I'm thinking that maybe this person is in need of help or something like that, or maybe this is an insane person and the light will scare them away. So I take the light out of my pocket, point it at her and turn it on. The moment the light hit her, she stopped moving completely. She was facing away from me. She had disgusting hair that seemed to be sticking together in clumps. Some of her hair was ripped off too. She was wearing a very oversized, bright red hoodie. I was almost too scared to move. I think she was too. I conjured as much bravery as I could and said, "Sorry," in a very oops, this is the wrong room kind of way. She did not respond. I turned off the flashlight and put it back in my pocket. Just as I was turning my bike around, she screams. She screams in an awful, high-pitched voice. I damn near shit myself as I throw myself back onto my bike. I hear her voice getting closer to me. I book it as fast as I can. I don't look behind me and I don't stop pedaling. Her screaming grew quieter and quieter until it dissolved into the howling of the wind. Scary car chase on dark, desolate road. Long-time lurker here. This is my first post. It's rather long, but hopefully worth the read for you. 2 summers ago, on my way home from an out-of-town day trip for my son's birthday party, we went to a water park and decided to go to dinner in this really small town after getting slightly lost due to Google Maps' crappy directions. After dinner, we noticed across the street was a county fair, so we checked it out for fun. It was getting dark and the fair was nearly over, but we caught a tractor pull that was about to begin. We'd never been to one of those, so we thought it might be a fun way to top off the birthday trip. We sat on the bleachers and watched for a while. There were a lot of families there watching, and also some drunk people as well. I did not think anything of it. I had my 16-year-old son with me and a good friend of mine, who is a strong guy, so I felt safe. We decided to leave the fair before the event was over, so as not to be on the road at night with the drunks. We walked back to the restaurant, which was now closed, and got into my car and set off for home. Backtracking using Google Map directions, we got on the road that I recognized would get us back home. I noticed that as soon as we pulled out of the restaurant, there was a car behind me, the only other car on the road, as most of the town's inhabitants were most likely at the fair or at home. The car followed us onto the road we took to get home, which I found odd because it was a desolate back hilly road with a wooded area on either side. I thought maybe they too were from out of town, and were using the same cut across to get to the interstate, as it was summertime and many people road trip. I still felt uneasy about it, but decided to just get off this po-drunk road and onto the interstate as soon as possible. As we were driving on this hilly back road, it was fully dark outside, and I kept it easy for fear of a deer running out in front of us. The car stayed right behind me. I slowed way down, hoping he would be annoyed enough to pass me for going too slow. Instead, he drove right up on my ass, tailgating me. I could see that there was only one person in the car and the windows were tinted. I dared to speed up, wanting to get on a main road or interstate as soon as I could. He stayed right behind me, going as fast or as slow as I was, not bothering to get off my bumper. I knew without a doubt we were being harassed now. I was getting scared. I had my son in the back seat. It was his birthday. This was unfair, and I kicked myself for going to the tractor pull. Of course, I could not have predicted this craziness. After what seemed like ages, we got into the interstate. I had hoped it was just some local jerk who wanted to scare some city folks, but I somehow knew it was not that simple, as I feared. He followed us onto the interstate. Even on the interstate, he tailgated us. I slowed down initially, hoping in futility that he'd pass us. No luck. I sped way up, he caught up, and stayed too close. Unfortunately, the interstate was quiet on our side. I had no choice but to keep going. My friend was very angry and ready to fight if necessary, but I wanted no part of meeting this guy face to face, especially with my birthday boy in the back seats. I just kept going and prayed to not get a flat tire. At one point, I got scared enough to lay on the horn while driving, hoping the noise would dissuade him. It worked! He pulled over on the shoulder and I saw his headlights turn off. I was relieved at first, but found it odd that he killed the lights. After that, we sped up and I was flying for home. The sooner the better. About 15 minutes passed. It was blissful uneventfulness. We talked about how scary that whole ordeal was, and eventually started feeling relieved to put it all behind us. Literally. We were about 25 minutes from home, and there were a couple of vehicles here and there which made us feel less alone on the road. At one point, when the cars thinned out, and we were once again alone on the road, something happened that I could not believe. Right next to us and slightly behind us. Headlights. Bright. Burst on. He had been following us that whole time with its lights off, staying carefully behind us and waiting for his chance to scare and surprise us. I almost started crying, but at this point, I was too angry. This guy had been following us for an hour now. Far ahead of us, I saw the taillights of a semi. I sped up quickly with a stranger in the car next to me, trying to pace us from the fast lane. I think he realized that I was trying to catch up with the semi, so for the first time in this insane chase, he did something truly dangerous and swerved at my rear panel, a pit maneuver trying to push us off the road. I sped ahead and missed him, clipping me by inches. I finally reached the semi driver and got close, hugging the back of his truck as much as I dared and leaving no room for this jerk to cut me off. We went this way for a little while. Finally, and I truly believe the semi-driver knew something was wrong, because after so long of seeing this crazy driver swerving at me and trying to get in front of me as I would not let him over, the semi-driver did something I will forever appreciate him for. He swerved over in the fast lane and dangerously cut off the stranger's car and then tapped his brakes. I knew it as my cue and sped ahead from the slow lane to try and lose this creep. I sped up to 85, 90. My hometown was straight ahead. I took a sharp left onto a back street that led to a main road and stopped in a busy, well-lit gas station. Luckily, there was a cop there. My friend got out and explained the whole situation to the officer, and he called for other cars to search for this guy. We left the gas station after calling a friend to follow me to a parking lot, where I stowed my car overnight because I did not want the guy to possibly find my house by recognizing the car. I watched my back for quite some time after that. I always notice that make and model of car in white if I see one on the streets. Thank goodness we got away safely. Now, the most bothersome thing about this whole story is that the small town where this took place happens to be the hometown of one of the biggest mental health asylums in the Midwest. This thought has kept me awake more than one night, and I still check the papers for stories of escapees. So, deranged, creepy driver, possible mental institution escapee, let's not meet. The tip jar. A scary encounter working at a bikini coffee stand at 4 a.m. Edit. Verified. What do you have to say now, disbelievers? I am not willing to share the evidence that earned the verified flair with anyone else, except the mods for obvious reasons. I am no longer responding to hostile comments or comments about disbelieving my story. If you don't believe it, I no longer care, as the support shown to me has been far greater and showed by intelligent, compassionate individuals. The tip jar. Against the advice of my parents, I started working at a bikini coffee stand when I was 17 years old, and continued working there until I was 20. If you're unfamiliar with bikini coffee stands, there are little drive-through espresso stands, usually painted in some neon color, where the employees all wear lingerie or bikinis while they serve coffee. I know, this sounds strange, and believe me, it is strange. However, the money was good, it was fun at the time, and my parents couldn't really afford to pay for college. There was no loudspeaker where customer placed their orders. They simply drive up to the stand, order coffee, and make small talk as they ogle you in your skimpy assemble. It's hard. It's hard to explain, so maybe just Google it. The Seattle area has them all over the place. Within the matter of months, the boss gave me the busiest shift. The shift began at 4 a.m. and ended at 9:30 a.m. Though the coffee stand was not officially open until 4:30, I had to count the till, grind the espresso beans, fill up the sinks, take stock, clean if needed, etc. The coffee stand was situated in the corner of a large parking lot, sharing the enormous empty lot with only one other retailer. The other retailer didn't open until around 10 a.m. And so when I arrived, the lot was completely dark, save for one dim streetlight above the stand, and another in the far corner of the lot. I pulled up the stand as I normally did, only this time, it was my first shift alone. Normally I worked with one other girl, as the shift would get far too busy for just one person. I had a routine with regular customers, as I literally worked every single day. The boss didn't believe in time off, unless requested. While I worked, I could see cars approach the stand, and know immediately what drink to prepare, based on my recognizing a regular customer's vehicle. After almost a year on the morning shift, it was rare to see a new vehicle, or meet a new customer. My boss was extremely strict about being fast and efficient, and would have us prepare drinks in advance for our regulars, while I waited in the line of cars. My boss was so strict that for the first 6 months of my working there, he would watch constantly on his camera system and call me on the business phone to scream at me for lack of efficiency. After this, I became so fast at preparing drinks, I guess he decided he would save money by having me work alone in the very early mornings. He was stingy too. So like normal, I approached the stand and punched in the access code. I went inside and turned on some music right away to keep myself company. The street lamp directly above the coffee stand had burnt out a few days before, so it was rather dark outside. Coupled with the tinted sliding windows of the coffee stand, and the knowledge that I was completely alone, I felt a little creeped out, though not nearly as creeped out and as terrified as I was about to feel in a few minutes. Even though the stand was technically open at 4:30, I wouldn't expect my first customer until about 4:45. I usually arrived at 4, but since it was my first shift alone, I came in at 3:30 to give myself enough time to complete all the opening tasks. My first customer was always Dave. He drove a red sports car and ordered a double cappuccino heavy on the foam. He worked for the local Boeing plant and would brag about his high-ranking job in between awkward remarks about my body. You get used to this sort of thing after a while, but nothing could prepare me for the sort of thing that happened to me on this particular dark morning. Though many of our customers were pervy men like Dave, most of the early morning customers weren't as luxurious as one would expect. They simply needed coffee, and no other businesses were open as early as ours. In fact, Many of my early morning customers were married women in soccer mom vans in desperate need of caffeine. I glanced up at the clock as I counted the money in the till. 3:50 a.m. I finished the count and walked from the back of the stand onto the main floor. There were 2 steps separating the back of the stand from the main floor. The back of the stand had no windows and contained a bathroom, large refrigerator, washer, dryer, etc. This is the area where my coworkers and myself would get ready and joke around where customers couldn't see us. As soon as we walked onto the main floor, where customers could see us, uniform was required, meaning lingerie or bikini as well as heels. That morning, I was wearing a matching pink lingerie set with knit stockings. The lingerie fully covered my breasts and buttocks and provided more coverage than a typical bikini you would see at the beach. I counted all the syrup bottles. I opened the fridge and took stock inside. I turned on the espresso grinder and robotically poured in a bag of espresso beans. I started filling up the large commercial sink with soapy water. Music played softly on the stereo. Then I heard it. Over the noise of faucet, coffee grinder, and the music, I wasn't sure I heard anything at first, so I just ignored it. Then I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. Someone was tapping on the sliding glass door of the stand. I wiped off my wet hands and grabbed my cell phone. 4:15 a.m. We weren't open for another 15 minutes. I checked the light switches to make sure I didn't accidentally flip on the open sign. Along with an open sign, the stand was equipped with bright floodlights to illuminate the presence of the stand. Due to the sheer darkness that morning, I had contemplated turning on the floodlights when I first arrived, but it was strictly forbidden to do so until the stand was open. Without the floodlights on, and through the tinted glass, I could not see who was on the other side. I stood there, staring at the window. Maybe it's just Dave. I rationalized to myself. Tap, tap, tap. I could hear my heart thumping in my ears. The tapping had definitely grew louder. I picked up the business phone and punched in my boss's number. He had an extensive camera system, complete with night vision, and could see both in real time inside and outside of the stand. In the very least, he could tell me who was outside. The phone rang and rang, no answer. I flipped on the floodlights. I walked over to the window and saw the man, now illuminated by the bright lights. His head was pressed up against the glass, hands cupped around his eyes as he tried to see in. I jumped back. "Hi!" he yelled through the glass. "Can I get some coffee?" "We aren't open for another 15 minutes, I replied. "My boss will be mad if I open early." "Oh well, I can wait." The man then walked away from the window and stepped into a small black Honda. I continued my opening duties, wearily eyeing the black Honda. At the time, I had a false sense of security, lulled into the daily routine of my shift. However, it was different. At 4:30, I dutifully turned on the open sign and watched as the man in the black Honda drove up to the window. He was wearing a dark red baseball cap, a thermal shirt, and plaid pajama pants. I opened the sliding window. "Hi, sorry about that. What can I get for you this morning?" I said, trying to sound as normal as possible. The man looked at me for what felt like an eternity. "What I want doesn't appear to be on the menu," he said, not looking up from my crotch. "Okay, so, I know what you're thinking. What did I expect working in this profession? Gentlemen?" I brushed his comment aside with a laugh. "We have a great white chocolate mocha." I looked around frantically. Where the fuck was the usual morning guy, Dave? I silently prayed another customer would pull up behind this guy. He looked away and stared at his steering wheel. "I want you to be my maid." "Excuse me?" I said, not sure if I heard him correctly. "I want you to be my maid. I want you to come over to my house wearing a maid costume with nothing underneath. I want to watch you, and if you don't clean correctly, I'm going to do whatever I want to you." He paused and gripped his steering wheel tightly. "I'm not a nice guy." He looked at me and smiled. Up until that point in my life, I had never seen a truly sinister smile before. I slammed the long serving window shut. I ran to the back of the stand, hyperventilating at this point. I picked up the phone and called my boss repeatedly. No answer. I stood on the steps and peered out the window. The black Honda was gone, replaced by the familiar red of Dave's sports car. I never thought I would be happy to see pervy Dave, but here I was, rushing to the serving window to tell him what had happened. I opened the window, all the while frantically relaying the story. Dave just laughed and muttered something about the guy dreaming. He told me I was being paranoid and the guy just had no filter. For some reason, this put me at ease. Dave reached his hand out the window to place a $5 bill in my tip jar. He tipped this amount each morning. "Wow," he exclaimed. "You just opened and your tip jar is already full. I know you make good coffee, but it's not that great." "Huh?" I said, slamming the register shut. The tip jar rested on the outside window ledge, so customers could reach it. I made it a habit of just leaving it outside in between customers, as it could get very busy. I leaned over and looked in the metal canister. Inside the tip jar was a long white envelope that appeared to be stuffed to its capacity. My stomach turned as I knew it had to be from the guy in the black Honda. "Dave," I said cautiously, "it's from that guy I just told you about. I am not opening that." Dave sipped his cappuccino, and suddenly his goofy demeanor turned serious. "You're right. Let me open it. I have gloves." It was late fall and rather cold outside. Dave put on his gloves in a dramatic manner, laughing about my paranoia, and proceeded to step outside of his car. He took the envelope out of my tip jar and opened it. "Holy shit," he said, his eyes widening. He held out a stack of $20 bills held together by a rubber band. On the back of the stack was a folded up piece of paper. He unfolded the paper and began reading it. His eyes grew wider. His hands were shaking ever so slightly. What does it say?" he simply said. "Get dressed and call the police." I snatched the note from him, his jaw slightly agape. The note was laden with spelling errors and looked as if it was written in a child's hand. Oddly, there were rather long words that were attempted but spelled incorrectly. It said some very deranged things. There are some things too sick to mention here, but I will relay the basic message as best as I can recall. Some things you just never forget, even if you want to. "You will come to my house. When you arrive, I will examine you thoroughly. I will then tie you to the post, and you will be punished for what you do. Every inch of your body will be bruised and sore. Afterward, I will untie you and use you in every way possible. You can scream, but no one will hear you. This is your first payment. Upon reading this note and taking this money, you will have agreed to follow through. If you do not follow through, you are a stealing, lying whore. And you'll be punished more severely than if you cooperated to this initial agreement. You will clean every inch of my house. There will be no mistake, or there will be more punishment to follow." I got dressed and called the police and my boss. The police arrived, and I went to the station to explain in detail what happened. I handed out the note, along with the money for evidence. The female police officer nonchalantly told me that I should probably quit my job, that this behavior was to be expected from customers. I told her that I had never experienced anything like this before. My boss reviewed the outside videotape footage. The footage showed a man standing outside of the coffee stand window just staring inside. Occasionally, it showed him leaning his head into the glass and cupping his hands around his eyes for a better view. It also showed him rubbing his crotch. Apparently, he had been standing outside the window since 3:40 a.m., 10 minutes after my initial arrival. At one point, it showed him going back into his car only to re-emerge several minutes later and finally tap on the window. I was shocked to realize that the man had watched me for almost an hour without my knowledge. I felt stupid, but most of all, scared. The footage also revealed that the man had his license plate covered with what appeared to be white paper. After reviewing the footage and the note, the police decided that the man posed a potential threat and that his behavior was not normal. They sent an undercover cop back in the stand with me. I was shocked that they wanted me to go right back to work not even 2 hours after the incident. The cop sat outside in an SUV while I worked. The plan was this: if the man drove through again, I was to flick the open sign on and off to alert him of the man's presence. I worked, serving all of my regular customers, trying my best to pretend nothing happened. I was told not to recall the incident to any of my coworkers or customers that morning, in case they knew the man, and warn him of the police involvement. The man did not return that day, but he did return. Little did I know, that day was only the beginning of a year-long nightmare. I know this reads like a work of fiction, but every single word of it is true. This is the first time I am fully retelling this to anyone other than the police, my former boss, my past coworkers, and my ex-boyfriend, so please, be nice.